Hey guys, Matt. One thing I was thinking about that I don't think we focus on is if you come up with a certain conclusion on your own, or you know that there is an element of reality that exists that didn't happen, or people can't see, or a certain event is fake, anything that we call truth. Once you know deep down that you're right about that, like most people here would say, I know, obviously, we didn't go to the moon. It's just, beyond ridiculous at this point. But many people will know that here, but most people will not have considered the chain reaction of what that means. Use that. If you know that, if you have a gigantic piece of a very complicated jigsaw puzzle, we don't use that properly. So when you know something, what's down the line, what's down the chain, what other dominoes can fall because you have that, and we don't do a good job of that. For example, what is that? If you know 100% that the United States didn't go to the moon, then what is the thing that just jumps out at me that leads to is, this new world order has existed for a very long time. Countries don't even exist as they are portrayed to us, like China or Russia being somewhat of an adversary to the United States, especially all that Cold War stuff. If you just think about it, if we didn't go to the moon, if Russia's its own country, adversary, independent, and absolutely at odds with the United States over ideological war between communism and capitalism, they would have immediately started a global propaganda campaign that nobody went. That's fake. They would have floated that. The fact that the Russians were doing their own space program, they're setting their own, trying to get their own people to the moon. Nobody goes to the moon. That means the logical conclusion, if you go down the line of the domino line or the chain reaction, is they're all working together. Therefore, even and you can keep working this down the line. If that's true, that all those stories we heard, it was about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, Russian fighter aircraft kept buzzing U.S. Warplanes, warships or carrier groups, and yeah, I'm sure that happened. I'm sure the people, the good sailors, the young men on the carrier groups looked up and saw the Russian fighter airplanes screaming overhead. That doesn't mean it wasn't staged by those in the back room of the back room as some event to make sure we always put forth that we have tensions between certain countries. This tension must always exist. So you can extrapolate. If you know we didn't go to the moon, and I'll ask you for your comments. What other thing do you know that have you guys ever thought that far down the line? Many of you have. Many haven't. What else can you add in the comments? See what I'm saying? There's no way. I just don't see how anybody would say, "Yeah, the Russians immediately knew we didn't go, but just stayed quiet." Well, why would they do? There was an if you I don't know how old people are here. If you're over 40, there was this. Again, I don't know how real any of this was, or how much we live in some sort of crafted script, but we were told there's an ideological battle between communism and capitalism that happened. This Cold War started right after World War II. Well, we're completely at odds with each other, Russia and the U.S. They would immediately take into a global campaign. That doesn't mean Dan Rather would have immediately gone and done interviews with Brezhnev and he listened to all the evidence why nobody went to the moon. This media system works for this control system, but they could have got the word out in a lot of ways. They just stayed quiet. And not only that, they tried to go to the moon themselves, or said so. They if you don't think we went to the moon, and then you look at the Russians are trying to go to the moon and say they failed, well, they're all one system. It's all one group of people. There is no country demarcations the way we understand it. Doesn't isn't I mean, am I missing something? Isn't that the logical conclusion of that? And you can do this with a lot of events if you're willing to think big enough and think around, think around more than one corner. I mean, you get into some really out there stuff. It all starts with you being completely confident of your premise. You might be confident, 100% confident that a certain shooting never happened. And if you really think it through, we'll say, well, what does that mean? How could so many people have been in on it? What does that mean? If you take it far enough down the line, you can it can get kind of scary where it goes. It can break down reality to levels that we wouldn't even expect. I mean, major things like why is say Africa always in a state of just war, poverty, disease, squalor? Is that a word? Squalor, disarray, chaos. There are pockets of heaven there, of course, but it is very hellish overall. Maybe it's not overall. Maybe that's what we're led to believe, but enough people have come and gone. There's some, obviously the poverty exists. The point is that there's no doubt in my mind, most people watching this, that whatever control structure exists here in this realm, part of the narrative that they're going to play out in this world is they're going to keep Africa in the shitstorm. That's what they will do to Africa. That's part of what they do. That's planned. I just think Africa being in a state of the state that it's been in for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, my first memories of Africa were, starving Rwandans and babies with big bellies, and it never ends. Could all of that have been relatively fixed by now if the good people of the West and the good people of the world work together? And sure, there doesn't have to be endless dictators and Aidid type despots in Somalia stealing food, and it doesn't have to be that way. The controllers foster that situation in Africa, in my opinion. But why would they do that? I mean, how far down the line are you willing to think? And this is kind of, there's nothing crazy. Everything's welcome here. There's nothing that's off the table. What if Africa is kept in squalor? Think about this. Simply so the people in the West, those under the direct thumb of whatever this control structure is, so we in the West look to it and relatively, on a relative basis, we think our lives are great. I mean, think about that. Is that possible that they would do that? Absolutely. The way this reality is crafted, in my opinion. So somebody right now say, you're telling me they keep the entire continent and other parts of squalor around the world that never get out of squalor, like Bangladesh or something like that. They keep that squalor going or foster it simply so we in the West look to it and say our lives are pretty damn good compared to that. Yes, it is possible. I don't know that. These are wild theories I'm pulling up, but I understand the nature of the beast that operates here. I don't know what it is. We will never know exactly what it is, in my opinion. But yes, the way this creature may think is these folks are directly under my thumb. They're the ones I need to control out my window, the ones that do marches in Washington, D.C. and live in the West. The West is this engine of, and I'm not just talking about economic engine. Could be the West is the engine it uses as quantum reality creators. That the engine that it always it dangles the carrot, and those in the West follow the carrot, creates the reality that the creature wants. And yeah, we'll keep an entire continent in squalor and in disease, simply so they are more comfortable and more satisfied with their own situation. And it leads me right back to my father telling me what my grandmother used to say when he wouldn't finish his food. And it wasn't Africa, it was China. They would always do China back then. The kids in China are starving. You need to finish your food. When a mantra like that gets out and millions of mothers are saying it, the control structure put it out. That's how it works. I don't know. I mean, I can be very sound very sure in my ways. I'm not. I'm trying to figure this out just like you are. I don't mean to sound too sure or confident. I believe that. I don't need to say I believe that or in my opinion every single time. It's all my opinion. That's pretty obvious. I don't mean to sound too confident. But back in the day, in the 40s and the 50s, it was finish your food, kids in China. Then it became, kids in Africa are starving. There's always that squalor around the world, and I know it's crazy, but just an entire continent kept in squalor simply to have this is a slave system here. If others around us are in much worse condition, then we automatically look to our condition as being very, very good. If we're the only house in the block with heat and air conditioning, it doesn't matter the state of affairs of our trailer. Could have holes in the roof. We have heating and air conditioning. Nobody else does. You feel you're pretty good off, and that is one of the no doubt. I mean, the control structure uses that. Is that why would they send Venezuela into complete chaos and disarray over the last 10 years? And it's not natural. It's not organic. It's not anybody listening to this saying, well, that evil tyrant Maduro or who was before him, Chavez. These are like puppet characters, obviously characters like Kim Jong-un. It's obvious. The West, or the powers, the creature in the back room, wanted to really screw Venezuela. Is it possible that Venezuela was trying to be like Gaddafi, maybe, and kind of stepped out of line and is being punished? Maybe, but I don't think so. When it's close at this point and it's a seesaw, and I'm not sure, on one side it might be something natural or organic, or somebody stepped out of line so the controllers punished him, or literally it's on the other side, it's just all part of the reality script. I almost always now fall on the side that it's part of the reality script. I just I don't think I've become delusional or anything like that. It's just the way I see it at this point. Like El Chapo, that whole story about El Chapo. I mean, for those that can read the Matrix code at this point, I mean, it's a joke. I'm not an expert on what happened, and I didn't do any hardcore research, but it's endless. 2 years ago, these endless El Chapo stories. Sean Penn goes down there. I mean, come on. And then there's a movie. Whenever there's a movie, I mean, come on. I don't need to know anything. I don't know why they created that, cooked it up. I don't know. I just don't. I don't know. And I was talking to Greg yesterday, and this has to be said in almost every video. We might go back and look at Abraham Zapruder and try to and have fun with that, but there's a lot of new people here, and it's almost like what we've learned almost needs to be repeated in every single video. Like, we've learned not to chase who's behind the final curtain. We'll never exactly figure it out. Never. That's the nature of this reality matrix. Stop chasing. Who is it? Anunnaki, Nephilim, reptilians, Rothschilds. Who done it? Who done it? Who done it? Mr. Mustard in the study. Who done it? Stop looking for who done it. We'll never have that exactly figured out. Two, the endless breadcrumbs. The Zapruder film, my last video. That's just another breadcrumb they throw out. Pissed on breadcrumbs, so we chase it and occupy our time and attention with it. And it's half of these things, or most of these things, are done poorly on purpose, so we chase it. I think somebody in a comment, was it the last one, said something about, or two back, Robbie Parker would actually, that was all staged, a smile. Why would they make that mistake? We've talked about that many times in the past. These mistakes are not mistakes. They're breadcrumbs, so we chase it, so we put our attention to it. No doubt about it, in my opinion, at this point. So stop chasing the breadcrumbs, stop looking for who done it, and the final details of any event are kind of irrelevant. How exactly did they pull off 9/11? It doesn't matter, as soon as you see it and say, well, it's a total ridiculous construct of it's this reality's construct. How'd they do it? How'd they do this? How'd they do it? The who, what, where, when, and why of it all. The who. Well, let's just go through them. The who, we're abandoning that. Who cares? We see a reality script of some kind is running. That's all we need to know. The who, the what. Well, the what we know. The reality script is being played out. So it's a carrot. So we follow the carrot. They use a different carrot for the masses. They use the carrot of more sex acts and more Porsches and more beach home and materialism. And they use a different carrot to lead us as the Pied Piper or as lemmings. The who, the what, the where. Well, the where is obvious, but we don't even know that. We fight about that, don't we? What is the nature of this plane? We fight about the where. Move on. It's not less filling. It's not taste great. It's something. It's one of the million parameters in between. The who, what, where, when. Well, when is, we're pretty sure about the when, although time doesn't exist. But, who, what, where, when, why. Why is another breadcrumb we chase. This is very interesting how these are all playing out as breadcrumbs. The why would they do it? They harvest our energy. They harvest our. I guess it's fun to talk about the theories. It's also terrifying, but it's not fun. But who cares? Who, what, when, where? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. The how they do it, irrelevant. This is very interesting. That the famous six elements is exactly the breadcrumbs that they want us to chase. So if the search has to do with the who, what, where, when, why, or how, then we shouldn't bother. Think about that. Think about that. Each one of those paths is a pissed on breadcrumb that they want us involved in doing. Could you apply, who really did? Why did they do 9/11? Who cares? The most important point, it's always about, like we've talked about many times, it's about making that turn and going, stop all this stuff out here. All it can do is show the projection, the reality projection of all the crap we should chase, and turning inward. And many people have asked me, well, what does that mean, turning inward? I don't exactly know. I'm not some yogi that sat on a mountain in Tibet for 2 years chanting. I don't know, but there are certain truths you get a sense of, like people that are talking about now, they repeat this over and over, and it's worth repeating over and over. We are not here to wake up our brother and our sister and our aunt and our uncle and our cousin to say, look at 9/11. We're not here for that. It starts with ourselves. Everything starts with ourselves. That's the first step of looking in, fostering your own soul tokens, bettering yourself. If this is some sort of a test of this life, which I believe that there's a great degree of probability it is some sort of a test that we might have put ourselves in ourselves, then we have to rise to a certain point or a certain level. There would be a pass and fail level to the test. And have I done enough at this point? No, absolutely not. I've woken some people up to a few things, but no, I have not done enough at this point. I have to keep trying to consider myself. If I'm here, well, what is here, and how do I get to here? It's all that's looking inward, turning inward. You know, where do you want to be? I mean, what do you need to work on? Where do you need to do better? It's not like turning in as this magical, mystical. I'm sorry, and everybody's gonna have this guy named Phil Langdon. Seems like a nice British guy. Not everybody's gonna have an experience where their pineal gland's gonna open up and they're going to see the structure. Like Levet has had similar experience as a child, as in an after a near-death experience. Very few of us, in my opinion, are going to have this pineal gland experience where you basically see the code and the nature of reality itself, and it's all going to come. I mean, maybe it's we should strive for that, but I don't think it's realistic. That has to be achieved in this lifetime. Like Phil Langdon, at one point, he believed he's the only one that's ever done it. Well, he didn't. Did he survey everybody? I don't know why he would say that, but very few have claimed to have. Even like David Icke had that on the mountain. That I don't know if it was ayahuasca or something like that. That complete enlightening experience. And I'm sorry, that's not going to happen to most of us. It's just not. I don't. You have to have a reasonable goals and aims. You start playing football as a seventh grader. You're not like I absolutely need to be the Super Bowl MVP someday, or this will be for nothing. It's not reasonable. I don't think we would have come in here in this existence, or we would even the creatures that maybe reside over the penitentiary. If you see it more like that, there's got to be a simple way to win. Okay, we sense that deep down. I mean, people talk about prison planet, and this is just simply a energy harvesting for whatever the creature is in the back room or behind the curtain. And if you really think about it hard, every resonant cell in my body says there's a way to win, a way to better ourselves, to rise above all of this, whether it be in this life, the next. Just if you go inside and really consider everything you consider to be inner knowing, inner wisdom, which is associated with gut feeling, the root of all of that is the most basic root is common sense. Knowledge that comes from somewhere else other than these idiot frontal lobes thinking in a crafted language that they crafted, a language that they laid down in advance. So we cast a few billion spells a day in their favor. Yeah, language laid down in advance is something very few people talk about. Why would there be common words and Latin roots in all these, quote, romance languages? Where'd that even come from, romance language? Whenever there's a term like that, it came right from the writers of the script, the controllers themselves. Romance language. What does that even mean? It's cooked up. I haven't researched it out. The romance. What does that even mean? Those that the pygmies in Africa they don't use Italian, a romance language, or French, or they have a language and they make romance, right? So what does that even mean? It's a joke. Whenever you have a term like that, it was put out by the system on purpose. So we have common Latin roots. How could that be? If all these languages just developed locally, tribally, language was obviously planned, laid down in advance by some sort of a control structure. We couldn't have common elements, shared Latin roots amongst Spanish and Italian and English and even similar words. Basically, the Tower of Babel story is a metaphor for what really happened. I don't know how loose or far off the metaphor is, but that's basically something like that happened. And then what if the control structure has been here this long and could plan language out in advance. This is where we talked about the domino line. Once if you just decide to really think on this and study it and say that, yeah, there's no way, well, how did language, aren't we told it all came up locally? And if Spanish came up locally and English came up locally somewhere and French came up locally, well, why do they have Latin roots? Why do they, you can see, like Levet probably could see all the how languages are all tied together. And if that's the case, well, it had to come from a central puppet master at some point, a long, long time ago. And if the control, how far back can you take it in your domino line? If the control structure did that and has been here this long, then think of the hundreds and hundreds of other things that break down. All your founding fathers in 1776, that breaks down, completely gone. There's a control structure that's been in this realm a long, long ancient time that actually delivered language. And you're talking, then guys, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, and that everything exactly about those guys and all those stories is all real? No, it's part of the construct. Do I have a family tree that actually talks about the Revolutionary War? And yeah. The real doesn't mean, of course, our grandfathers could tell us that they were in World War II. This shit happens. This shit goes down. But the history of it, the way it's described to us, is not. It's a puppet. The puppet masters crafted. They crafted for their own means. They crafted to move humanity in certain directions. So how if you see language was laid down in advance, then the logical conclusion is a control structure has existed here a long time. Okay, some people say hundreds of thousands of years. But if you see that, then everything the feel good stories about 1776 is mostly bullshit. Even I'm not saying these people weren't real. I'm not saying maybe they were complete pawns in what the backroom creatures were crafting up. And Thomas Jefferson really believed he was going to start a new nation of freedom, and all the intentions maybe were good. I don't say they're all in on it or they're all I'm not saying that. We've all been misled at every level. Even like we're talking about the horrible situations in Africa. An African dictator may sit on his throne, and he might think he doesn't know anything. He thinks he's all big and bad, and anybody goes against him will have him killed. And he has through the drug trade he makes a few $1,000,000. And I'm not painting every single African country to be like that. I'm not doing that. Obviously, Africa's a big place, some beautiful things. I'm just saying that situation exists in Africa today. It always has, and it's because the control structure wants it that way. Don't read into what I'm saying too much. I'm just saying that one, Muhammad Adid or whatever, he thinks he's all big and bad. He doesn't realize if the controllers wanted him out, he could be out. They might want that situation. He doesn't know anything about a pyramid on the back of the dollar bill and a global control structure. He just thinks he's a badass dictator that's taking control of the country. Well, he wouldn't be there for 1 second if they didn't want him to be. But he doesn't know that. See what I'm saying? They've just created the conditions so a badass that can run machine guns can rise to the top. See what I'm saying? So it doesn't mean Thomas Jefferson was in on it. Maybe he was. But it means if you form certain conclusions about the nature of reality, then take it down the line. Seriously, think it down the line. Well, if language is planned in advance, and there is, or anything, if you believe a deep, dark control structure has ruled this realm for a long, long time, well, 1776 is a fairy tale. And the more you think about it, the more it starts to play out like a fairy tale. One if by land, two if by sea, and the poems, and um, they took Paul Revere's Ride, and they took the Lexington and Concord, and look, again, I have relatives that fought and died in that. Obviously, in all these wars, real people died. Real people are manipulated. That doesn't mean there isn't. You've all seen that. They picture it as a satanic hand. I guess what is it? Maybe it's an I pet goat, or we've seen this the satanic hand that has the puppet strings, and whatever that hand is has ancient knowledge. Okay, it's pretty obvious, has ancient knowledge, and they're going to manipulate groups of people in any way they want. So again, the main point of this video is, if you see or you really know something for sure, like everybody here knows 19 guys with box cutters didn't just bring the U.S. to its knees on 9/11. Boy, if anything was real, those Soviet generals. Imagine the conversation they would have had, the day after. Igor Vladimir, we spent how much on this Cold War? We spent $1 trillion over 35 years, when all we could have done, all we had to do, was hire 19 guys with camels and box cutters, and we could have got a guy in a cave to coordinate it all. Would have brought their financial system to the knees. They would have brought everything to the knees. We could have, if we would have just kept our asses in good shape, we could have used the 9/11 event, which, what we would have paid, those 19 guys would have required a lot of money to do that. No, you just give each family 50 camels. That's all they had to do, the Soviet Union, to bring down the United States. But instead, they spent $1 trillion, fought a Cold War, backed regimes in war like the North Vietnamese, built carrier battle groups. All they had to do was get 19 guys with box cutters. I mean, it's a joke. An absolute joke. But if you believe, of course, that 9/11 didn't happen the way they say, like, is there anybody that would be stumbling upon this video that would believe that what Anderson Cooper would tell you about 9/11 is true? Then I would encourage, what I'm encouraging you to do is say, how far can you take that? How far? What does that mean exactly? Well, it means that almost no one in government is what you think it is. I mean, there are a lot of Trump supporters, amazingly, that see everything about 9/11. I mean, who wouldn't be able to see it? It's such a joke. But they're Trump supporters. Well, what is he, just being quiet? I mean, if he's the president and the president's real, then he would. I mean, he doesn't say anything about 9/11. I mean, but somehow they rationalize that. It's a psychosis, almost. If anything about Trump was real, again, like I've said, on the first day of the inauguration, he would have marched right to the White House, surrounded himself with like the 1st Infantry Division or whatever exists of Army, because this deep state is pervasive and it has to be taken out, and there's going to be a lot of bloodshed. And he would have talked about 9/11 and all the other fraud that has gone on for hundreds of years in this country, would have revealed truths, would have said, like, you think the USS Maine, if anything about Trump was real, you think the USS Maine just blew up? No, here's the paperwork right here. We cooked it up. It was an excuse so we could go fight the Spanish. You think the Lusitania was real? I mean, what does Trump do? He's just quiet. He just plays ball. I mean, who could possibly... There's even people here that believe in... I mean, there's so much fraud that you would talk about in your first day in office. You would also surround yourself with whatever group you could trust. I would go right to the military if anything was real, and say this, now that I'm saying this stuff, there's something exists here called the deep state. If I was Trump saying this, it's going to come after me. So I'm going to ask the 101st Airborne to return home, and the 1st Infantry Division to return home, and basically camp out around the White House. That's what we need to. If anything was real, something like that would have happened. But Trump doesn't say a word about anything. He doesn't even talk about the thousands and thousands of violations of the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Doesn't talk about it. Doesn't even mention it. Like there's not been one. I mean, yeah, I hope to blank. There's no Trump supporters here on this channel. I mean, you've got to be kidding me if you think anything about politics is real and not a crafted stage show. I mean, did I even? I don't watch this stuff anymore. But does Nancy Pelosi back? I think I heard. That's just not possible. If any, we know everything's fake. Okay, but this is a fun little side exercise. It's just not. Why isn't that alone enough to wake people up? I mean, people that think it's all real going, they're recycling this old hag again? She's now come and gone from the leadership for something like 20 years? Like, why doesn't a regular person just use this mindset? They're recycling the loathed one. She's hated. There's no one's ever going to work with her. There's so many hundreds and hundreds of people in the House, they couldn't find new young blood to bring people together. See, one of the reasons in my opinion, they recycle these old hags and these hated individuals like Mitch McConnell on the other side or Lindsey Graham on the other side, or the reason they do this is because it's another fallback excuse as to why nothing gets done. So even if you had they can control, the Democrats can control the presidency, the House, and the Senate, or the Republicans can control the presidency, the House, and the Senate, and still nothing changes or nothing gets done. And obviously, we know why nothing gets done, and it's all fake. I mean, but people that aren't where we are say, well, nothing gets done, and they might say, yeah, it is unusual when the Republicans control everything. There isn't even one law passed on third trimester abortion. They don't do anything. Nothing. The trajectory of government never changes. One of the reasons they keep these old hags and tired old losers like Mitch McConnell is you can always fall back and say the leadership is just an absolute disaster. Like I have relatives that would just that are even Democrat would say, yeah, we just we had our opportunity because we controlled everything, but Nancy Pelosi, the leadership, she's hated. They can't get anything done. It's literally just another excuse buffer as to why nothing changes. There is no reason. I mean, if you ever have a conversation with the people around you, God bless you. I hope you can. But there is no reason in the world anybody could possibly explain why they would vote a creature, an absolute sea hag, scum of the earth, like Nancy Pelosi, back into power after decades and decades of being hated and of failure. Well, it's not failure. Everything is laid down on purpose. It appears to be failure. To somebody that thinks politics is real, it would appear to be failure. It's not failure. But you could literally say to somebody that the fact that she's now back in power by itself, without you knowing anything else about anything that we talk about or know, it by itself proves the entire thing is fake. Nancy Pelosi, gotta be kidding me.